Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking some absolutely incredible insights from Simon Sinek on how to find your true spark and become a real leader in your own life. We're going to explore 5 fundamental rules for purpose and leadership. But hey, before we dive into those principles, we really have to talk about this massive trap that so many of us fall into. And that is tying our entire self-worth to our job title. Sinek points out something absolutely crucial. Your purpose is not your job. It's not your title, it's not the rank you hold, and it's definitely not the specific daily tasks you do. Because think about it. What happens when you retire, or if you lose that job? If you've basically woven your whole identity into your career, you suddenly wake up without a purpose. Your spark just has to be something bigger than your job description.
Finding that true spark begins with understanding one crucial difference. When we're working really hard for something we honestly don't care about, well, that's called stress. But working hard for something we actually love, that right there is called passion. If you're going to find a purpose that completely transcends your job title, you have to find that passion. You got to find that bigger why that drives you forward, even when things get super tough.
All right, let's jump right into rule number 1. Section 1, mindset, obstacles, and accountability.
To illustrate what it means to truly go after what you want, Sinek shares this brilliant story about running a race in Central Park. So at the finish line, there were free bagels. Awesome, right? But there was also this massive line of runners waiting to get them. When Sinek suggested to his friend that they go grab a free bagel, his friend only saw that long, annoying line. He just kept saying, "I don't want to wait in line." But Sinek, he just kept looking at the prize, saying, "Free bagel." This perfectly highlights 2 fundamental ways you can see the world. You can either look at the thing you want, the bagels, or you can focus entirely on the thing preventing you from getting it, the line. The rule here for finding your spark is that you can go after literally whatever you want and do it your own way, just as long as you don't deny anyone else the right to go after what they want. You've got to focus on the goal, not just the obstacle.
Now, this brings us to a seriously dark piece of medical history. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, women were dying in terrifying numbers from something they called the Black Death of childbed within 48 hours of giving birth. Doctors desperately wanted to solve this, so they would study the corpses of these women by conducting morning autopsies, and then, shockingly, they'd just go straight to delivering babies in the afternoon. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that Oliver Wendell Holmes finally pointed out the glaringly obvious missing step. These doctors weren't washing their hands between the autopsies and the deliveries. He basically told them, "Guys, you're the problem." And incredibly, they called him crazy and completely ignored him for 30 years. When they finally started washing their hands and sterilizing their instruments, the disease just disappeared.
So the takeaway here is captured perfectly in this quote. Sometimes you're the problem. Take accountability for your actions. Look, you can take all the credit in the world for the things you do right, but it has to be a balanced equation. You have to take equal responsibility for the things you do wrong. You don't get to have it one way and not the other.
Moving right along, Section 2, teamwork, help and listen.
Well, let's take a look at one of the most intense team environments on the planet. The United States Navy SEALs are arguably the most elite warriors in the world. So who actually makes it through their notoriously grueling selection process? You'd probably assume it's the guys with the huge, bulging muscles, covered in tattoos, just eager to prove how tough they are, or maybe the delegating leaders who just tell everyone else what to do. But here's the thing, none of those guys actually make it through.
The guys who actually make it are sometimes the skinny, scrawny ones who are literally shivering out of fear. But the ones who survive all share one defining trait. When they are physically and emotionally completely spent, when they have absolutely zero left in the tank, they somehow dig down deep and find the energy to help the person right next to them. If you want to be an elite warrior in whatever it is you do, it isn't about being the smartest, fastest, or toughest. It's about getting incredibly good at helping the person to your left and the person to your right.
Which leads us to this stark reality: the world is too dangerous for you to think that you can do these things alone. Seriously, the single most valuable skill you can ever practice is learning to accept help when it's offered and having the guts to ask for it when you're stuck. We all sort of pretend we have everything under control, but the minute you drop the act and just admit you don't know what you're doing, you'll find that the people who love you will rush in to take care of you. But remember, that only happens if you've learned to take care of them first.
To see how this concept really builds, let's look at leadership and listening. Nelson Mandela is universally regarded across the globe as a truly phenomenal leader. So how exactly did he develop his unique, universally respected leadership style?
Mandela learned by watching his father, who was a tribal chief, interact with other elders. He noticed two very distinct rules. First, they always sat in a circle. Second, his father was always the last one to speak. Now, we are always told we need to learn to listen, but the true master skill is holding your opinion until everyone else has spoken. Think about it. If you walk into a boardroom, state your brilliant opinion, and then ask what everyone else thinks, well, it's too late. Being the last to speak does two crucial things. It makes everyone else feel heard and valued, and it gives you the massive benefit of hearing everyone's thoughts before you even render your own. So don't nod yes, don't nod no. Just sit there, ask questions to really understand their perspective, and be the last to speak.
Next up, Section 3. Environment dictates your performance.
Take a look at this comparison between two radically different management styles. Sinek tells this great story about Noah, an incredibly friendly, engaging barista who served him coffee at a Four Seasons hotel. Noah enthusiastically told him that he loved his job. Why? Because all throughout the day, managers, like any manager, not just his direct boss, would walk by and actually ask if he needed anything to do his job better. But here's the twist. Noah also worked a second job at Caesar's Palace, and he said the managers there only ever tried to catch people making mistakes. So at Caesar's, Noah just kept his head down under the radar to get his paycheck. But at the Four Seasons, he felt totally free to actually be himself.
And this brings us to a massive revelation for anyone out there trying to build a team. We are constantly obsessed with getting the right people on the bus, right? But here is the plain truth. It's not the people, it's the leadership. Think about Noah. It is the exact same employee in both hotels. If leaders create the right environment, they get the absolute best version of their people. But if you create a toxic environment of micromanagement, you just get people surviving for a paycheck.
Finally, we've reached the last rule, Section 4, Humility and the Long Climb.
There's this brilliant story of a former Undersecretary of Defense speaking at a huge conference. He stood on stage holding his coffee in a cheap styrofoam cup, smiled, and just completely went off script. He told the audience that the year before, when he spoke at that exact same conference, he was still the undersecretary. They flew in business class, someone met him right at the airport, checked him into his swanky hotel, and the next morning they drove him to the venue and handed him a beautiful ceramic cup of coffee. But this year, he was no longer the undersecretary. He flew coach, took a taxi, checked himself in, and when he asked for coffee at the venue, they just pointed to the machine in the corner where he poured it himself into a styrofoam cup.
The lesson he shared with that audience is a profound reminder. You will always deserve a styrofoam cup. As you gain fame, fortune, or seniority in life, people will inevitably treat you better. They'll hold doors for you, they'll bring you tea, but you absolutely must realize that none of that stuff is actually meant for you. It is meant for the position you hold. It's meant for the rank. Enjoy the perks, be incredibly grateful for them, for sure, but retain your humility. Because that ceramic cup is for the job, the styrofoam cup is for you.
And as you hold on to that humility, you also have to manage your expectations for success. Sinek says he frequently talks to smart, hardworking young professionals who want to quit their entry-level jobs after just 8 months because they feel they aren't making an impact. They're hyper-focused on this abstract concept of fulfillment. They want to be right at the summit of the mountain. But what they don't see is the massive mountain standing right in front of them. You can't just teleport to the summit, folks. You literally have to climb the mountain of impact first.
Things like love, job fulfillment, deep joy, real self-confidence, and building a genuine skill set, all of these things demand immense patience. You might be able to expedite tiny little pieces of them, but the overall journey, it's long, it's arduous, and it's difficult. There is simply no app, no shortcut, and no life hack that lets you just skip the climb for the things that truly matter in life.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this ultimate question to ponder. To make it up that arduous mountain, to hold out for the styrofoam cup, to sit in the circle and be the very last to speak, you need incredible fuel. You need the will and the profound desire to understand what truly moves you. So, what drives and inspires you for the long climb ahead? Find that spark, hold tightly onto your humility, and just start climbing. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you on the next one.